His prayers stopped plagues. His blessings won wars. But one day he dared to curse the prophet himself. And from that moment his wisdom turned to poison, and the tongue that had known the greatest name of Allah fell forever from his mouth. Why? Because knowledge without humility does not bring one closer to Allah. It transforms a person into what he was inside, into a slave to his own pride, into a dog. When Balaam ibn Baor was dying, his tongue hung from his gaping mouth, touching the dust. The old man stood on all fours by a muddy puddle on the outskirts of the city, lapping water like an animal, whimpering hoarsely. Children returning from the market threw stones at him and shouted, "Scholar dog! Scholar dog!" No one remembered that 50 years ago this man had known the greatest name of Allah, that kings had come to him on their knees, that his prayers changed the course of rivers and healed lepers, that he was the greatest sage among the sons of Israel, a beacon of wisdom before whom the righteous bowed. Balaam's fall was so terrifying that even those who had seen him in glory preferred to forget. But the story of his choice, that single moment when he raised his hands to curse the Prophet Musa, survived the centuries. Because this is a story about how knowledge without humility becomes poison, and how a man who held the name of God in his mouth ended his life unable to pronounce even his own. Balaam lived in the Jordan Valley in the years when the people of Musa were journeying to the Promised Land. His house stood on a hill, white-stoned, with narrow windows and a flat roof where he prayed at dawn. Inside it smelled of olive oil, parchment, and dried herbs, the scent of scholarship that permeated the walls. Scrolls lay in stacks in niches, some so ancient they crumbled at a touch. Balaam had studied them since childhood, absorbing knowledge as sand absorbs rain. By 40, he knew the Torah by heart, including those parts that were not written down, but passed in whispers from teacher to student. By 50, he understood the secret correspondences between letters and numbers. And at 55, after a night spent in a cave without water or food, the greatest name was revealed to him. There are names of God that can be spoken. There are those that are written but not read aloud. And there is one which, when pronounced correctly, with the right intention, with the right breath, opens the gates between worlds. Balaam knew this name. He never spoke it without necessity, but he knew he could, and this knowledge changed him. At first imperceptibly, he began to speak slightly slower, slightly heavier, slightly colder. When people came to him for advice, he gave it without raising his eyes. When they asked about interpretation of scripture, he answered flawlessly, but without joy. His wife noticed first. He stopped laughing. Then he stopped sleeping beside her. Then he stopped eating with the family. He would go to the roof and stand there until morning, gazing at the stars. And in his chest grew a strange feeling, not pride, no, something more subtle, a sense of separateness. Knowledge made him different, not better, different. People came to him in pain, he healed them, and they thanked God. But Balaam knew he could choose not to heal. He could do the opposite. The power was not in God, it was in the name, and the name was in him. Fame grew like a crack. Kings sent messengers with gifts, requesting blessings before battles. Balaam blessed, and they won. One king sent 100 rams, another a Nubian slave who could read the stars. A third offered his daughter in marriage. Balaam refused everything, and the refusal made him even more desirable. People said, "He does not touch gold, therefore he is holy." But Balaam knew the truth. He did not take gold because it was too small. What is a kingdom when you know the name? In the courtyard of his house, there were always students, young men with burning eyes, who wrote down his every word. Balaam taught them the Torah, laws of purity, mysteries of numbers, but the name he did not transmit. He said, "You are not ready." Some left disappointed, others stayed for years hoping. Balaam looked at them and felt contempt, so quiet he did not notice it himself. They will not understand. They are unworthy. Only he. And with each day the crack in his heart widened, but he called it wisdom. King Balak ruled Moab, the land east of the Dead Sea, where hills were red with clay and the air was dry and hot as a furnace's breath. His palace stood in Dibon, a city with crooked streets and markets, where they traded myrrh, purple cloth, and slaves from distant lands. Balak was not a tyrant in the usual sense. He did not kill without reason, did not rape his subjects' wives, did not burn temples. But he was afraid so strongly that fear turned into cruelty. The Israelites were marching through the desert. The people of Musa, led by a pillar of fire and cloud, were moving toward Canaan. They had passed through the lands of the Amorites, defeated King Sihon, destroyed King Og. There were 600,000 men, not counting women and children. Balak stood on the palace roof and looked at the dust raised by their tents on the horizon. He saw the smoke of their altars, heard the rumble of their prayers, and he knew, if they come, Moab will disappear. He called the council. The military commander said, "We cannot defeat them in battle." The priest said, "Their God is stronger than our gods." Then an advisor named Agag, a thin man with a sharp chin and eyes that did not blink, said, "There is one way. There is a man among the Israelites who knows the name of their God. If he curses his people, God will turn away. Balaam ibn Baor. He lives in the Jordan Valley. Send to him." Balak listened and nodded. He did not believe in the God of the Israelites, but he believed in curses. He sent 3 elders of Moab and 5 from Midian, an allied land, with bags of silver, gold bracelets, and a letter sealed with red wax. The message was brief. "Come and curse the people who came out of Egypt. They cover the land. They are at the borders of my possessions. Curse them. Perhaps then I can defeat them and drive them from the country. For I know, whom you bless is blessed, whom you curse is cursed." The messengers walked for 9 days. Dust ate into their clothes. Sun burned their necks. At night they slept by fires, listening to the howling of jackals. When they came to Balaam's house, it was evening. They bowed, handed over the letter, poured silver on the threshold. Balaam read the letter slowly, running his finger along the lines. His face did not change. When he finished, he said, "Stay the night here. In the morning, I will give an answer." He knew he should refuse. He knew that Musa was a prophet of Allah, that the Israelites were a people chosen for covenant. But he did not refuse immediately. And in that pause, in those few seconds of silence, his fate was decided. That night, Balaam lay on the roof and looked at the stars. He thought about the silver that lay below. not about the silver itself, about what it meant. Recognition. Balak, king of Moab, feared his prayers. Kings feared. This was power of another kind, not what knowledge gave. This was power that changed the maps of the world. Balaam closed his eyes and tried to pray, but the words would not come. Instead of prayer, a thought spun in his head. Just once. Only once. What will change if I pronounce a curse? Musa is strong. His God will protect him. But I will prove that my power is real. That I am not just a vessel, but what? Master of the name? He fell asleep at dawn, and he had a dream. He stood in the desert, and before him an angel with a sword. The angel said, "Do not go." But when Balaam woke, he remembered not the angel's words, but the gleam of the sword. Beautiful, deadly. He went downstairs. The messengers were waiting in the courtyard. Balaam said, "Return to the king. Tell him, the Lord does not permit me to go with you." The messengers bowed and left. Balaam watched them go and felt a strange disappointment. He had made the right choice. But why did it bring no joy? Balak did not give up. 2 weeks later, new ambassadors came, more noble, with greater gifts. They brought not silver but gold, not a letter, but an oral message from the king. Whatever you ask, I will give you. A palace of white marble with gardens, slaves who will record your wisdom, a city where your name will be honored as a king's name. Only come and curse this people. Balaam listened, and the crack in his heart split open. He said, "Wait, I will ask the Lord once more." And this was a lie. Not because he did not pray, he prayed, but he prayed already knowing the answer he wanted to hear. He stood on the roof, raised his hands, and whispered, "Lord, perhaps this is your will? Perhaps through me you will punish them for their sins. Perhaps." And God, in his incomprehensible wisdom, answered, "Go, but speak only what I tell you." Balaam heard the first word and did not listen to the second. He went down to the ambassadors and said, "I will go." The journey to Moab took 8 days. Balaam rode on a donkey, old, obedient, who had carried him for many years. The ambassadors walked ahead, leading him through stony paths, past thorn bushes and dried riverbeds. On the 3rd day, the donkey stopped in the middle of the road. Balaam beat her with a stick, shouted, but she would not move. She pressed against the rock, crushed Balaam's leg, and he beat her even harder. Then the donkey spoke. With a human voice, hoarse and sad, she said, "What have I done to you that you beat me?" Balaam froze. Before the donkey stood an angel with a drawn sword, invisible to man, visible to animal. The angel said, "If she had not turned aside, I would have killed you. You are going a path that leads to destruction." Balaam fell to his knees and said, "I have sinned, I will return." But the angel answered, "No, go. Only speak what the Lord puts in your mouth." And Balaam went on. He did not understand the warning, or did not want to understand. King Balak met him at the border. A feast was arranged in a tent on a hill, overlooking the valley where the Israelites were encamped. Roasted meat, pomegranate wine, honey cakes. Balak sat on a platform, dressed in purple, with a gold circlet on his forehead. He smiled, but his eyes were cold. He said, "Why did you not come at once? Can I not honor you worthily?" Balaam did not answer. He looked toward the Israelite camp, where fires burned, where women baked bread, where children played between tents. He thought, "This is God's people. I cannot." But another thought said, "You can." The next morning Balak led him to the top of Mount Bamoth. There 7 altars were built, on each a bull and a ram. Smoke rose to the sky, blood flowed down the stones. Balak said, "Look, there they are. Curse them." Balaam stood and looked. Below, in the valley, stretched the camp of the Israelites, a sea of tents, ordered like a pattern on cloth. 12 tribes, each under its banner. The tabernacle in the center, covered with blue and purple curtains. The pillar of cloud above it. Balaam saw all this and knew, if he pronounced the curse, he would curse not people, he would curse God's design. He opened his mouth, and something inside him trembled. The crack he had grown for years suddenly became an abyss. He wanted to say, "Let them be cursed." But instead from his throat burst, "How can I curse whom God has not cursed? How can I condemn whom the Lord has not condemned?" The words came by themselves, against his will. Balaam tried to stop, but his tongue lived its own life. He spoke of the beauty of the Israelite camp, of the blessing that was upon them. Balak paled. He grabbed Balaam by the shoulder and hissed, "What are you doing? I brought you to curse enemies, and you bless them." Balaam was silent. He could not explain. He himself did not understand. Balak led him to another mountain, then to a third. Each time new altars, new smoke, a new attempt. And each time, when Balaam opened his mouth to curse, blessing poured from him. On the third mountain, he spoke words that burned his own throat. "I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star rises from Jacob, and a scepter rises from Israel." He spoke of a future king, of the Israelites' victory, of Moab's fall. Balak listened, and his face blackened with rage. When Balaam finished, the king said quietly, with icy fury, "Get out. Flee to your place. I wanted to honor you, but the Lord has deprived you of honor." Balaam stood on the mountaintop, and the wind whipped his clothes. He looked at the Israelite camp below, at the tents, at the smoke of the altars, and inside him fury churned. Not at the king, at himself, at God. He received neither palace, nor gold, nor glory. Worse, he was disgraced. The king thinks him weak. The Israelites do not even know he tried. God used him as an instrument and discarded him. And in this fury was born the last, most terrible thought. If I cannot curse them directly, I will find another way. Balaam did not leave. He remained in the lands of Moab for several more days. He found Balak again and said, "I cannot curse them by the power of the name, but I know their weakness. Their God is jealous. If they defile themselves with fornication and idolatry, he himself will punish them. Send women to their camp. Let them seduce the men. Let them bring them to the altars of Baal Peor. Their God will do what I could not." Balak listened, and a smile appeared on his lips. He did as Balaam said. Moabite and Midianite women came to the Israelite camp, young, beautiful, with perfumes in their hair and bracelets on their wrists. They seduced the men, led them to shrines where stood idols of Baal, where sacred prostitution was performed, and the Israelites fell, thousands of them. God's wrath descended on the camp. A plague began. 24,000 people died before Phinehas, grandson of the high priest, pierced with a spear an Israelite and a Midianite woman right in the tent, and the punishment ceased. Balaam stood on a hill and looked at the smoke of funeral pyres in the Israelite camp. He had achieved his goal, not by curse, by cunning. But the victory was empty. Nothing remained inside, no joy, no satisfaction. Only a strange heaviness, as if something had broken forever. He tried to remember the greatest name, to pronounce it at least in a whisper, and he could not. The letters scattered in his head like ash. The knowledge he had accumulated all his life, the knowledge for which he had refused everything, disappeared. Simply disappeared. He stood with his mouth open, trying to remember at least one letter, and could not. His tongue became heavy as stone. He moved it, and the tongue fell out of his mouth, long, swollen, touching his chin. Balaam screamed, but the scream came out as a hoarse bark. When the Israelites took vengeance on the Midianites for the seduction, they found Balaam among the enemies. He sat in a tent, with his tongue hanging out, muttering something incoherent. A warrior named Eleazar recognized him. He had been one of the students many years ago. Eleazar looked at the teacher, at the man who had once explained to him the mysteries of the Torah, and saw an animal. He raised his sword and brought it down. Balaam's body remained lying in the dust, and his story went strange ways. Some said he died by the sword. Others, he fled and wandered for years until he died by a puddle, lapping water on all fours. The truth was somewhere in between. Balaam did not die immediately. The sword did not kill him, only mutilated him. He fled from the camp, bleeding, crawled through the desert, drank from dirty puddles. The wound healed, but he did not return home. Could not. Knowledge was gone irretrievably. He forgot the Torah, the laws. Even his own name sometimes he forgot. The tongue never returned to its place, hung from his mouth, interfered with speaking, drinking, eating. He learned to live with it. He wandered through cities, begged for alms, slept in ditches. Years passed. The Israelites occupied Canaan. Musa died on Mount Nebo, never entering the promised land. Joshua led the people onward. Cities fell one after another, and Balaam still wandered, bent, dirty, with his tongue dragging on the ground. Sometimes someone recognized him. Old men who remembered his glory turned away. Young people laughed. Children threw stones. He did not resist, accepted everything as his due. He died in a city whose name he did not remember. It was a hot midday. Dust hung in the air. Balaam stood on all fours by a puddle left after night rain. The water was murky, smelling of rot. He lowered his head, touched the surface with his tongue, drank, choking like a dog. Children stood aside and laughed. One boy, about 7 years old, asked his father, "Who is that?" The father answered, "Scholar dog." Once he knew everything. Now he does not even know his own name. Balaam drank and suddenly stopped. Something clicked inside, not in the body, in consciousness. The fog that had shrouded his mind for years cleared for a moment. He saw everything at once, the choice he had made, the palace he had preferred to paradise, the curse that had turned against him, the greatest name he had considered his own, though it had never belonged to him. He had been a vessel that God filled with knowledge, and he had broken the vessel with his own hands. He understood. The punishment was not cruelty, it was mercy. God showed him the truth in life, that knowledge without humility is poison, that serving God does not give power over him, that the name was a test, not a reward. And he failed the test, not when he agreed to curse Musa. He failed it years earlier, when he began to think that knowledge made him special, that he was not like others, that he was worthy. Balaam closed his eyes. His tongue hung in the dirty water. His heart beat slower and slower. The last thought was strangely clear, almost calm. I received what I chose, not a palace, an exact reflection of my heart. He died there by the puddle, and no one closed his eyes. The body was found the next day, already swollen from the heat, buried in a common grave outside the city, where they buried paupers and criminals, without a stone, without a name. But his story did not die. It was passed from mouth to mouth, from fathers to sons, from teachers to students. It became a parable, a warning. When rabbis spoke of pride, they remembered Balaam. When they taught that knowledge without fear of God is nothing, they told of the man who knew the greatest name and ended life on all fours. The tafsirs, Islamic interpreters of the Quran, also preserved his story. In Surah Al-A'raf, there is a parable about a man to whom Allah granted signs, but he turned away from them. Many believe this is Balaam. The Quran says, "If we had willed, we could have elevated him through it, but he clung to the earth and followed his desire." His example is like the example of a dog. If you attack it, it will stick out its tongue, and if you leave it, it will stick out its tongue. A dog with its tongue hanging out. This became a symbol. A man who cannot be satisfied, who chases the world and loses his soul. Balaam became a shadow that follows everyone who confuses knowledge with wisdom, who thinks that God's gifts belong to him, who believes that service gives the right to demand. Centuries passed. The cities where Balaam lived turned to ruins. Moab disappeared as a people. Israel scattered and gathered again. And Balaam's name remained, not as a memory of a sage, but as a warning. In Jewish tradition, he is called one of the greatest villains, not for what he did, but for who he was. A man who had everything, and chose nothing. There is a detail rarely mentioned. When the Israelites found Balaam's body after the battle with the Midianites, beside him lay a scroll, decayed, almost unreadable. On it were written letters, not words, just letters, scattered chaotically, as if someone had tried to remember something important and could not, tried to gather scattered knowledge, but the letters would not form meaning. This scroll was burned with the other trophies. But one of the warriors, seeing it, said to his comrade, "Look." He tried to remember until the very end, and he could not. This is the truth about knowledge that is not rooted in humility. It does not remain. It cannot be held by force of will or intellect. It is given and can be taken away. Balaam knew the greatest name of God, but the name did not know him. Because true knowledge is not what you remember, it is what you become. And Balaam became a dog, not as punishment, in exact fulfillment of his choice. He traded the image of God for an animal and received an animal. God gave him exactly what he wanted, only he did not understand what he wanted until it was too late. The last person to see him alive, that 7-year-old boy by the paddle, grew up and became a teacher of Torah. Many years later, already an old man, he told his students the story he had heard from his father about the great Balaam. Then he added, "I saw him at the end. He was on all fours, lapping dirty water, and his tongue hung like a dog's. I did not understand then. Now I understand. He showed us the truth. Knowledge without humility is not wisdom. It is a curse. Better to be simple and whole than learned and broken." And this story, told thousands of times in different languages, in different centuries, always ended the same way. The teacher would look at the students and say, "Remember Balaam. When you study the Torah, when you grasp mysteries, ask yourself, for what? To elevate yourself or to serve? To become special or to become whole? Because knowledge is a gate. You can pass through it to God or to yourself." Balaam chose himself and lost everything, even himself.